Hey guys, Private Jack here. This is part 10 in the series on how to create a butterfly and get it into Source Filmmaker through Blender. So, we've been working away on our little butterfly and we've got it located, rotated, scaled. It's the proper scale we need it to be for the actual working with the characters. However, it's a pretty mundane model. It doesn't do anything. If I was going to do anything with this, I'd get rid of the bones, put one bone on it, and throw it into Source Filmmaker as a prop. I want to give it a little more life. So I'm going to create an animation where the actual wings flap. And so I'm going to come back into solid mode and have a look at the model. And the way that we add animation to our models is by posing and doing exactly the same thing we would do in Source Filmmaker. Okay, so I'm going to go into front mode, probably use the 8 key to move it down so I got a little bit of a perspective on it. And what I want to do is I want to create a flapping motion of the wings. So the actual model is going to start out in the standard flat wing pose, right? So that's exactly where we want it. And the way that we pose in Blender is by selecting bones in pose mode and adding keystrokes. So I've got these guys selected and I'm going to rotate. Before I do that, what I want to do is I want to actually have the wing start out in this position. So at frame 1, this is where my animation is going to start. I'm going to press I to insert a keyframe. And I want it to be rotation, like that. As soon as I add a keyframe to the time bar, the time frame in the if I select the time frame in the window, I'm going to find that whatever element I gave that particular pose is going to turn yellow here in location, rotation, and scale. Now, before we go on any further, I think I'm going to delete this rotation by doing an Alt-I. Yes, I'm going to delete that keyframe. When it comes to Source Filmmaker, most rotations are done using the XYZ rule rotation method. Blender defaults to quaternizing. This. It rotates on 4 different aspects of the bone. Okay, W, X, Y, Z. I'm going to change the actual rotation mode of this model and I'm going to change it to XYZE rule. Okay, now when I do my rotations will be in degrees. So now I've got the bone selected. I'm on frame 1 and I am going to press I to insert keyframe and I'm going to just leave it at 0. Notice how it turned yellow. Now, average butterfly flapping sequence is approximately a second, okay, for a complete flap. So let's see. I'm going to record my animation at 24 frames per second. So in 1 second would be 24 frames. And at 24 frames, the actual flapping motion should be back in this location, right? This rotation, because it's one complete flap, up, down, and back again. So, let's see. Which way do I want to go? Okay, at 24, I want it to be in this location, so I'm going to press I and insert a rotation keyframe. So if I play that animation, nothing happens, which is exactly what I expected. Okay, so let's come back here. At 12 seconds, let's see. If it flaps downward and it's only doing a quarter of a rotation, that means that the downward beat should be somewhere at 24 divided by 4, 6 seconds. So I'm going to place my timeline on 6. And I'm going to select those 4 bones. I'm going to rotate on the y-axis. No, I'm not. I'm going to select this bone and this bone. I'm going to rotate on the y-axis. No, I'm not. I'm going to change my pivot point to the individual origins. Now I'm going to rotate the left side on the y-axis, and the reason why I pressed Y twice is because I've got a little bit of a bend in the actual geometry here of the bone. Watch what happens when I press Y. Rotate R on the Y, and you see how that changed? Okay, now if I rotate down, it's going to rotate on that y-axis on each individual origin point. Come back into 1. I've gone a little bit too far. Rotate on the y, pull it back up a bit so that I'm not breaching the floor. The red line is the floor. Notice the origin point. Rotate on the y, pull that up so that it's just touching the floor like that. Now I'm going to select these 2 bones. I'm going to do the same thing. Rotate on the y, and what's going on here? I've got the wrong bone, don't I? I've got the antenna. So let's make sure we got the right bone this time. Come back into the front view. And if I actually look at the rotation of what I've got here, why did that go back to quantum? E rule. XYZ rule. Right. I got to fix this again. Control Z, Z, Z. Z, 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 Z. Let's go back to here, to 0, 1. Select the entire armature. Come out of pose mode. Go into object mode. On XYZ. Okay, that's good. Go into pose mode. Ah, there we go. Had to go back and have to reselect XYZ mode. Okay, now we should... No, what the devil? I guess you have to go through and actually select them individually. Okay, anyway, go into 1 mode, right, come back up 1, 2, select those two bones, back into front mode, rotate on the Y axis twice, and rotate these guys down. I don't want to clip the floor. Okay, I'm right at the floor right there. So minus 33.635. I'm going to round that back up to 0.60. Just like that. Okay, now I'm going to select the other side. And because I know what that rotation is on this side, I can copy that. Select these two bones and do the inverse of that rotation. So that was a negative. I'm going to make this 33.6 because it's on the other side. Enter. And you didn't go. Why didn't you go? V. Enter. Okay, now that I didn't reset. There we go. Make sure you're in the key spot that you need to be in. 0. Control V. 0. There we go. That's good. That's good. That's good. Not. Control V. Inverse. Other side. There we go. 1. And we're just flapping a little bit through the floor. Let's select these two bones. 1. Rotate YY. Bring it back up above the floor. Probably point the 32 degrees. 32 degrees. Zero. 32. 0. Minus 32. And minus 32. It's all playing minus 32. There we go. Now we should be good. 1. There we go. We're just touching the floor, and we've got a little bit of extra flap on the actual back wing, which is what we want. Now that we have those bones where we need them to be, what we're going to do is we're going to select all 4 bones and insert a keyframe by pressing I and rotation. Okay, so let's go to the next element, which would be back to zero. And that would be at 12. Let's delete that keyframe. Alt-I, delete that keyframe. That's good. Okay. Okay, at 12, let's move our cursor to 12. Our flap sequence should be at 0. But we're going to leave that alone for now. 12 plus 6 would be 18. We're going to move to 18. And we're going to rotate the wings so that they're in their upper position. So select that one. Rotate on the Y, all the way up to the top of the stroke. Grab the next one. Which would be this one. Rotate Y, all the way up to the top of the stroke. Just a little bit further on so that we've got a little bit more play on the wing. At 38.7, 38. We'll change that to 38. This one is at 36 degrees. This one is going to be minus 36 degrees. This one is going to be minus 38 degrees. Now if we look at bang on, there we go. We've got that little bit of extra play in the back wing, right where we want it. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a keyframe. Rotation. And we're going to go through and we're going to mark each one individually. Okay. So, if we come backwards, we've got a little bit of flap. And we've got a problem with this guy right here. Keyframe. These guys didn't take their keyframe. These guys should be at 0. Because that's where we're starting out from. That, go around, mark that keyframe, I rotation, and I rotation. Now we should get some flapping action here. Flap down, flap back up, and then at 24 we want them to come back down to 0. 0. 0. 0. And 0. Okay, so we're going to set our end frame at 23 instead of, oh no, before we do that, what we're going to do is we're going to actually mark this keyframe. I, rotation, I, rotation, I, rotation, and I, rotation. Now we're going to set this endpoint at 23. And the reason why I'm setting it at 23 is that we started at 0 on frame 1. Okay? This animation is going to loop. So at 12, or at 6 rather, we're at the bottom of the stroke. At 12, we're at the top of the stroke. And at 23, we are 1 beat away from 0. It's going to loop from 23 back to 0 and finish the actual animation. So this is what it's going to look like. And we've got that flapping motion that we want. Okay, let's stop that and let's have a look at Blender Source Tools. In Blender Source Tools, what we're seeing is that we have an animation added to our exportables now, and the animation name is armature action.01.dmx. If we split our screen, the little perforated edges up here, come down here and we open up the dope sheet, we're going to find our animation. If we change this editing context being display as dope sheet frame to action editor, what we see is the actual action editor, and this is where we can change the name of our actual animation from what it is now to flapping. Okay, now that it's changed, what we can do is we can come back into our Blender Source Tools and we'll see that this has changed now to a animation called flapping. Here we can see the actual armature properties, armature, and there's our flapping animation right there. These are the only two, this is the only animation that we have to export. You could go through, you could make more if you wanted to do something with the actual antenna. The way that you would have to do this is you would have to go back into that animation editor, the action editor, okay, and add a new animation. Adding the new animation, you would go through it, you would select all these points. If you don't want the wings to flap, B, select them all, X to delete. Select the bones you want to actually click on new action, select the bones that you want to actually animate. Start at frame 1. There they all are. Go to frame 10 or wherever you want to go. Rotate that. Rotation. There they are. And play the animation. Let's change that to 9. Oops. Change this to 9 and play the animation. Nothing is happening. What's going on here? Well, we're still object mode. Have to think about this. There's our flapping. Change this to action. Stop. Bet you if I come back here, they're going to stay where they were. Of course, object. Pose mode. Pose, clear, transform, all, I, rotation. Let's see what happens now. There we go. I want to spread it out a little bit. Stop the animation. Grab this one here by right-clicking on it. Press G to grab. I can spread it out. It now ends at 25. So I need to increase this to 25. Actually, it's 26, isn't it? No, 25. Okay, so now if we play this, it's a little bit slower. Down here, I can change the name. And now I have two animations that I can play with. Okay. If I don't want this to drop down the way that it is, like on the wrap, what I can do is I can actually come in here, right click on that, Shift D to duplicate, grab it, no, Shift D to duplicate, grab it, pull it across, and let's say I want it to end here. So now what I've got is the antenna going up and then right back down again. That's ending on frame 35. Increase the frame count. Play it. And now this is what we've got. And then you just enhance from there. So that's animating in a nutshell in Blender. Okay, let's stop that animation. We've got a flapping animation. Now, why is it stopping there? Is because I didn't adjust my time. 23. Come on. Enter. There we go. 23. If you don't like that little bit of a stop motion in there, now what you're looking at is getting into things like the actual curve. Let's go into the graph editor, and if we select those bones, what we've got is a bell curve. We would need to go through and actually change these to linear. And that gets rid of that little pause in the animation. That looks a little better. Okay, so I'm not here to teach you how to animate. I'm not here to teach you how to model. I'm here to show you how to get these things into Source Filmmaker so that they actually work. That's animating in a nutshell. And with that, I'm going to say Private Jack out.